Oh boy, we have another great topic for you all tonight, you game masters and players looking to up your game in Star Trek Adventures RPG. I'm Michael Dismuke. I'm a blogger on Continuing Missions, which is the #1 site for Star Trek Adventures and Captain's Log RPG. Happen to also be a freelancer for Star Trek Adventures RPG and the lead writer on Captain's Log. And of course, this show is not a show unless we have my partner in crime, Jim Johnson.
Hey everybody, Jim Johnson. I'm the project manager and line editor for the Star Trek Adventures RPG and the Captain's Log solo RPG, both published by Modiphius Entertainment. And I am thrilled to be on this show with Michael, going on 100 plus episodes now, 2 years strong, going into year 3. I just am just so impressed and humbled that we've made it this far, and we've got still so much more yet to do. If you had asked me, 2 years ago, if we'd still be doing this after 2 years, I'd be like, nah, we were just doing one episode or 2 episodes or one product or something. And then it just kept going and going and going. And thrilled to have a great guest on tonight, Al Spader, who's been on a number of our shows, is a super strong writer. Is going into his own creative zone right now with some original stuff. You go check out Sentience if you haven't already. 2D20 World Builders. It's awesome. And it's gotten lots of love from Modiphius. I see the World Builder newsletter come out, and Sentience is prominently featured on a lot of those newsletters. So I'm just thrilled for everything that you're doing, Al, and some of the sneak peeks you've shown me of some other stuff. So I'm thrilled about that. But I'll stop talking. Introduce yourself and plug your next big thing.
All right. Hi, everyone. I'm Al Spader. I am a freelance RPG writer. I've done a bunch of work for Star Trek Adventures. And like Jim said, I am the creator of Sentience 2D20, where you play sentient robots and build a better world, so to speak, a positive look at AI. And got some other things coming out, hopefully in the first quarter of this year. We will hopefully have something to celebrate soon about that. But as for tonight, we are discussing a much talked about topic, and that is, how can we ease our players into starship combat? So we see a lot of stuff online in all the social medias of new GMs or new players trying to understand the ship combat rules for Star Trek Adventures. So tonight we're going to try to pitch some ideas with you on how to ease people into a starship combat scenario, and maybe give you some tips and tricks as to how to enhance that experience along the way.
Nicely done. All right, so let's just jump into it. You both are much more mechanically inclined than I am. Not to say that I don't like mechanics, but I much more lean into the narrative. And I don't want to say I avoid mechanics, but if I can find a narrative way into things and describe it that way, so much the better. I look at like the big fleet battles in the Dominion War and Wolf 359 and stuff like that, and I'm like, where's the character moments? Like yeah, sure, the combat's going on over here and the combat's going on over there, but like, where's the cool character moments? And I think DS9 did that pretty well in the Dominion War, where you see all the different wings fighting each other and the pew pew going back and forth, but then it always goes back to the bridge and it's focusing on what's the characters doing, what's Cisco doing, etc. And so I would almost generally lean into the narrative and just kind of like narrate around the mechanics. But that's not why we're here. And I know that I'm a different perspective, but I wanted to just provide that color commentary to say, game masters and players, you don't have to reuse the rule set as it's written. You could get fuzzy around the edges if you want to. But Al, Michael, if you want to go more raw, rules as written, by the book, or if you want to even take what's in the book and kind of like dance around it. I know we'll talk about Captain's Log in a little bit, but as far as STA, what are your thoughts as far as like how does a bunch of newbies wanting to get a starship combat and not talk their way out of it like a lot of players do, how do you get into starship combat in STA?
Yeah, I want to expound on what you said really before we quickly run into that, because you made a good point that it depends on the narrative, right? So there's times we see in Star Trek where a ship battle is happening and you're not seeing any of the photons or phasers firing. In fact, they don't even cut to external shots. Now we know they did that because of budgetary reasons, but that forced the creativity of the writers to say, how are we going to write a space battle and we're only showing the interior of the vessel the entire time? And so my first piece in saying this is, when it comes to ship battle and you're going to have one in your game, you need to make a couple determinations. You need to make a couple determinations, as you said, character moments. Is this about character moments? In that case, why do you even have to roll for the ship to ship battle extensively? We'll talk about simplifying those mechanics later in ways you might do that. If it is a Dominion level fleet battle, can you modify the rules so that you're not handling every phaser shot, but you're teaching it more like a tactical exercise on a larger scope? So maybe we'll talk about how we do that and ways you can creatively use the 2d20 dice to do that. And I know we've done that in our game that Al plays in the USS Pioneer. And then if it is a one-on-one ship battle, what's the goal of it? Like, is it to exhibit how during a ship battle different systems go down and how talented your characters are with workarounds and jury rigs? So really, it's all about the story you're trying to tell, which is going to determine what type of ship-to-ship battle you're going to have.
Yeah. And the first thing I would say that you want to think about, and we've done this before on several different continuing conversations, talking about the ship as a character, right? So if your players have had a chance to experience personal combat and things like that, the ship is just another character, right? And it happens to be a character that every person playing in your game has access to and can use as a tool. But if you think of ship combat as like character combat, you'll see that it's very, very similar mechanically. And I think that's kind of like where we'll start off, right? And I know a lot of people, when discussing ship combat for the first time, suggest do a one-on-one. Like if you want to learn the rules, do a one-on-one ship combat, and that'll give the players a chance to see all the different things they can do once the battle starts happening.
Yeah, I'm going to invite also, you talk about one-on-one ship battle, if you really want to make it easy on your players, and you're going to see this in some upcoming modules that are coming out in Star Trek Adventures, is make it their ship against maybe a pirate ship that's only scale 1 or scale 2. So the fear of losing is kind of out there, but they get to play with the mechanics of firing phasers, seeing how shields work, maneuvering, evasive maneuvers, just start them where they obviously outmatch this person. Because if they're playing a Starfleet game, they're not going to kill the person. They'll probably end up putting them in a tractor beam anyways. But start small and then have them meet somebody of the same scale. And then, of course, freak them out later and give them a Borg cube to fight against.
Oh, brutal. So one of the things that you both touched on a little bit that I was wondering if we could kind of play with a little bit is I wonder if in the core books, of course, there is a fairly long list of actions players can take during Starship combat, right? Different roles have different things they can do. There's lots of actions. There's lots of momentum spends in combat. There's just a lot of stuff it's not so much stuff, it's options, right? There's so many options that you can play with. And then you add on top of that the character role benefits that you get, like the captain, the commanding officer has a benefit, the XO has a benefit, et cetera, et cetera. So everyone's got all these different benefits. And then, of course, you've got your talents too, right? You got different talents that can impact Starship combat or movement or being a cool pilot or something. So, as a player, so as a game master, of course, you got to kind of have the sense of all that stuff in your head, just like any game master, right? I mean, you got to know the rules and you got to know what your players have. And then as a player, of course, even though you've only got, 4 talents and a character role ability and, all those options in combat, like how do you take all that down and distill it and simplify it so that someone new to the system is not just completely overwhelmed and they just say, oh, you know what, I'm just going to roll 2d20 and shoot phasers, right? Like, and just lean back into the traditional mindset there.
So, I was actually just thinking the exact same thing. So I'm glad that you brought that up. So there are cards that Modifius has put out. You can get them in I think the Klingon starter set. The Borg Cube had some that talk about what each character can do on a station. I believe that they're also available as a digital download. Yep. So I would suggest, like, if you know this is something you're going to do next, if it's your first time with a group introducing this type of combat, make sure that the characters have access to those things ahead of time. The last thing you want to do is to have somebody sitting across the table from you drop down, all right, here's 12 new options for you. That will really bog down. And I know, Michael, you talk about analysis paralysis all the time. It really is an overwhelming thing. So I think preparation is the key for yourself and for the players that you're playing with. So if you can get access to any of those cards, that would be really, really helpful.
Yeah, I've had those cards, but at my tabletop playing group, we have neurodivergent people and also people who speak English as a second language. So that's not super helpful for every player at my group. So what we did in our session 0 when we set up, it's like, okay, what's your role? And let's talk about, what do you think you can do with the ship buttons? Like, what kind of things do you do? What kind of thing, and then I gave them a little overview of the technology. And each game I kind of build it like watching Star Trek Prodigy. I make sure we incorporate a trope from Star Trek into each one of the games. So we're 9 games in right now. And I made sure that we introduce them to transporters or communications or deflectors. So with that, you don't pile them with everything. When you as a GM are structuring the adventure, say, okay, this time we're going to explore navigating through dense asteroids and dangerous planetary systems. So it's about navigation and trying to fight another ship while navigating through asteroids. And I leave it there. So in person, my point in saying that is, if they don't memorize all the different things a navigator can do, I ask them, well, what do you want to do? And oftentimes they'll say, well, I want to hide behind an asteroid so I don't get hit. And then when the other guy comes around the corner, I want to sneak up on him. Perfect. That's 2 different things. Let's handle it just like that. And then I'll tell them, okay, use this combo of stuff. A couple times that works. Online, Discord, of course, it is of course different, because we play on Discord and we use ModuleBot. And ModuleBot has all of it programmed in. So if my player was to say, I want to do evasive maneuvers, I can just type in the code and it shows them exactly what role they need to do. So there's some really nice tools out there that simplify, but really I just want them to envision what they're trying to do without technobabble. And then I, as the GM, feed it to them. And after a couple rounds, they get it. They understand the rhythm.
Yeah, I've found that I like to really just encourage the players. Like, what do you, like you're saying, what creatively, what do you want to do in this battle? It's like, instead of them saying, well, can I do this or can I do that? It's like, sure, you can you can try to do literally anything. So just tell me what you're going to do. I'm going to use an evasive maneuver, and I want my ship to sling around behind the other one and do a 180 corkscrew or something, and give my tactical officer an advantage. Can I do that? It's like, sure, that sounds like a task. The ship will assist you. Do you want to buy some extra dice? And instead of it being like an extended task, just make it more like a like not even a gated challenge, like a linear challenge, right? Just task after task after task. Just break it down really simple. Lean into the core mechanic of target number 2d20. Did you get enough successes, right? And play a little bit with momentum and threat until they're more comfortable with the rule set, and they can say, "Oh, I just discovered I'm the best pilot or I got the talent. I got this great talent that I can use to make my combat maneuvers even better." It's like, well, okay, yeah, so now use that. But in the meantime, like, if I want my players to just really come up with cool ideas, right, based on what they've seen on the shows or just whatever's on top of their head. I don't want them to feel like they can't do something because the system says they can't do it, right? Because, like, I think our system is so flexible. You just have to kind of like get into between the lines of the rules a little bit and kind of break it open. But Al, I'm eager to hear your perspective on this.
Yeah, I think that so like what Michael was saying is, using these asteroids to fly around. A lot of the abilities that a character gets when they're on the bridge that they might use in combat can also be used not in combat. So as you are building up to this combat experience for the first time, you may want to have some type of, bottle episode where everyone's on the bridge playing around with their abilities, where the stakes aren't nearly as high. And that'll get them familiar with what they are capable of. But to your point, Jim, I think what is really cool about role-playing games these days is there's a lot of describe your action, I'll tell you what you need to do, right? As the GM. So getting characters familiar with what they want to do and then seeing what rules fit for that, I think works really, really well for Star Trek Adventures. And I think the more narrative you can get with what you want to do, the cooler stuff the combat will look like, right? Mm-hmm. So I think Create Advantage, like you said, is a very important tool here. Mm-hmm. If there's not a specific thing that you can do in the rules that you would like to do, I think the Create Advantage mechanic helps with that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think Michael will be really happy to hear me say that you just need to lean into the yes and part of the story, right? Find out what your players are excited by and excited about, and then just lean into that. And like, if the mechanics aren't helping, or you feel like you're gonna have a stopping point where you need to go flip through some pages and break the momentum, don't resist that and just say yes and I know there's been a couple instances in my sessions where I would just go with it. I would just kind of like decide, oh, you know what, I'm going to make this a difficulty 0 task, or I might just narrate it and just like not even ask them to roll a dice, because the group is vibing in this moment and we're doing good and like cool things are happening. And I would almost rather reward the players by coming up with a really cool idea than making them, okay, that sounds like a great idea, now roll. Because like even just picking up the dice and rolling takes that beat away from you, and if you're in the momentum of the scene or something, right?
Maybe what we could do is to have a little helpful tutorial, and maybe we'll cut these into 3 small videos. Actually, what we're about to do, what I'm going to suggest we do. I think what we should do is, why don't we talk about how we may modify the game mechanics for a fleet battle, like you're seeing behind me if you're watching the YouTube video, like a Dominion War level fleet battle. And then what we'll do is we'll talk about how we may use or modify mechanics for a ship-to-ship battle, you against 1 or 2 ships, right? And then we'll go and say, you know what, if you just want to really simplify the rules, almost captain's log level, for those who play solo RPG, what would ship-to-ship battle look like? So does that sound good if we talk it from the high level down to the low level?
Sure, we can do that. How are we going to transition that and then edit it out?
Oh, I'm just no. We're going to keep it for this episode. But I'm saying, riffing,
okay.
Yeah, but lately, if any of you follow us on YouTube, Jeff at Studio Timbo, who's our producer editor, he's been making these little 1-2 minute clip stuff. So maybe these will turn into like little 5-minute how-to for different level battle.
So that was a peek behind the scenes without actually going behind the scenes, because we don't really do any edits on this show.
Exactly. It's if these may be good for us in the future for quick. When people say, "How do I do fleet battle?" we can maybe shoot it to them. So
there you go.
We'll see what happens.
So we're doing a little bit of meta commentary here for you folks.
We
are. I hope you enjoyed it.
Yeah, behind the scenes.
All right. So let's switch gears in a little bit and let's go to the high level fleet battle engagement kind of stuff, and then we'll work our way down to the single ships. Okay.
Yeah. So what I'll do is I'll use actually a battle that Al played in on our game if you'll remember, when we did the scavenger, the Star Ravager episodes of USS Pioneer. People could go look those up and read them. But there was a time when our ship was working with some other ships that were actually cause dragons. They were actually space dragons that were fighting alongside us, manned space dragons, against another fleet of vessels. And I knew this was going to be a big pivotal space battle episode. So what I did, in agreement with the players, is we treated space battle basically one-on-one. So if they're facing one person, we had that role going on. But for everybody else fighting, we treated it like a game of Risk. So if you know the game of Risk, you have the dice, the 6-sided dice. And if you have 5 armies against 5 armies, you roll all the dice. and you match them up by rank, and all the top dice beat the small dice, and ties mean both armies stay. So we treated it using the D6 like Risk, and we put ships for ships like that. So if 6 ships were coming at you, you get 6 dice. They have 6 dice, and you only have 3 dice in your sub fleet because different fleets are breaking up. Then they're rolling 6 against your 3. We know how math works on that. So that's how we were maneuvering this fleet battle, and it was scary. Some rolls you do great, and some rolls you get your butt kicked. And it really symbolized to me what we saw like in the Dominion War level, and that's how we were handling the fleet level battle. Al, what was your take on that scene? You were freaking out during it. So
yeah, I mean that was a lot of fun, and pretty epic. And what it did is it kept the narrative going, right? Because we were really focused on one ship, and then the other things were happening in the background as well. I would, give a shout out to the Homeworld role-playing game, also by Modifius. They introduced some really cool mechanics for fleet battles, and I would take them and adapt them to Star Trek all day long. In that, essentially what they do is they have each character around the table takes control of a ship. And then those ships have used the crew qualities that adversary ships use in the core rulebook. And basically they become the person that controls all the actions for the ship that they take over. So that if you want to do like mass combat, mass fleet battles, and not focus so much on the character side of things, I would definitely recommend looking into those mechanics from the Homeworld game, and just look at your crew qualities that you can put on different NPC ships, and say, okay, well now this is a PC ship that this person is in charge of. And those type of battles can go a really long time and can take a while to get through. I would warn you of that. But if that's something you're interested in, it's definitely an option.
Yeah, great ideas. I would even, the system is so flexible, and you can expand it or contract it, right, if you want to. Like I was thinking, like if you were playing with a group of players and you wanted to get into this tactical fleet combat where you're worried about the left wing and the right wing and the center, like you could have each of those be a separate task, right? Like lean into the crew the numbers you were just talking about. Now I just drew a blank on what they were called.
Crew quality.
Yeah. So like is the right wing gonna press the advantage on the enemy? Maybe it's a difficulty 2 task. Roll for that group of ships as one entity, and did they roll enough successes? Okay, they're pressing the attack. Now we switch the camera over to the center where the player ship happens to be. What's going on here? That gives you a chance to kind of zoom in a little bit on the human element, or the humanoid element, I guess, getting into the characters that we care about. And then you can zoom back out, go to the left flank. Okay, what's happening on the left flank? Maybe there's one player character who's communicating with them over there and can use their character role or a talent or something to kind of help them. Maybe it's the commanding officer giving a command, or it's the first officer who's using their role ability to spend momentum to give them a determination back or something, right? There's ways you can play with it and play with the narrative and keep rolling some dice just to keep things moving, to play with it a little bit.
Yeah, there was
go ahead.
I was going to say, there was even a mechanic, Alan. I'm kind of forgetting. I'm going to have to look at my old Excel spreadsheet. But we had created that if you have your fleet, the choices you had each turn were to attack, flee, like move zones away to be out of range, regroup, or split your fleet.
Mm-hmm.
So we had created it so you're not attacking every round. You actually can do maneuvers, because if one fleet gets blown away and scaled down from 7 ships to 2 ships, they need to regroup. They need to get into a bigger fleet, And so that was kind of a fun thing. And I'll probably add that to continuing missions for people to see that.
Yeah, the one thing I would put forth to you all is that if you are going to do this style of combat and you want to have multiple ships and multiple things going on, I would probably not go into super detail on some of the minutia of ship combat. Mm-hmm. For example, like going into specific systems to see which are breached. Instead, I would just keep track of the total number of breaches. Basically, the modified GM breach tracker I would use for every ship that anybody is using. Like, don't go into detail about, now there's a fire in engineering and you have to send people to go deal with it, because that's not the point that you're trying to get at with this, and it'll really, really slow things.
Yeah, and we didn't do that at all. I want to point out, remember, we treated it like risk. If a ship lost in ship-to-ship combat, we just had it pictured like that ship blew up, no explanation. So we did not go down to the minutia of multiple breaches at all when we did our huge fleet combat. And I thought that really worked because people were freaking out trying to figure out how many ships do we have left every round.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, think about the Minion War, or even like the Battle of Wolf 359. Like, as the camera's moving around, things are happening in the background or in the sides of the cameras. You'll see ships getting hit and spinning off and out of control and blowing up. Like, that just happens. That's just casualties of war. It happens. But add that into your narrative, right? So, don't, like I was saying, don't focus on the minutia and track breaches for every single ship, because you'll just turn it into a slog and you'll never get it. It'll never get done. But just like pepper in some narrative, like the wing of Excelsior class ships are coming in on the side and they're not doing so good. They get hammered. Two of them go spinning out of control and explode in violent shards of light, blah, blah, blah. And you just go on from there. So, just think about what you've seen on screen. I think Star Wars is a bit of an extreme example, because that's what Star Wars is really all about, is the pew pew and the blow up. But for Star Trek, it's a little different because there's more pathos, in my opinion. But just think about what you've seen on screen, and like, these things happen, and pepper that into your story.
Yeah. And as a game master, remember, your players are the heroes. They are not like the other ships. They're supposed to be the best ship out there. So we don't need to treat them like a risk roll. For some reason, narrative purposes, of course, they survive. They are most likely to survive because they are the center of the ship. So you don't treat them like battle fodder like the other people.
Mm-hmm. Unless you have a really, 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 really good narrative reason, like the beginning of Emissary, when Cisco, even though he was the hero, his ship got blown up, and there was a reason for it. There's a narrative reason for that. Correct. But it's okay. So it's okay to punish the player character's ship once in a while, but you got to have the right, story reason for it.
Oh, yeah.
Although that being said, of course, the Defiant did get destroyed. So, spoiler warning, 30-year spoiler warning for those who haven't watched all of DS9 yet.
Good. So anything to add about that? Because I think that's a good segue to ship battle and how to treat that. Does that work, Al, for you? Okay, because I want to go with what you just said, Jim, because again, I'm going to keep using our game as an example of how we've played it, because it's fresh in my mind. There have been times where the characters, and correct me if I'm wrong, Al, where the characters have been in pain because the ship was taking just such a beating in a ship-to-ship battle. So maybe I'll let you introduce it, Al, and then we'll talk about how best to handle and teach ship-to-ship battle to players.
And the first thing I think I would lead off with is 90% of the time, ship combat doesn't last until a ship gets destroyed, right? It somebody gives up, somebody flees, someone is damaged, because I think if you follow the rules to the letter, I mean, we're talking about super megalithic structures here, right? They can take a lot of punishment before they actually become destroyed. So I would put forth to game masters and players that if you are getting into a ship-to-ship combat, it's likely that neither ship is going to blow up. So I would just lead with that right there, and just remember, the ship is a character, right? So your players should all feel connections to the ship that they're on. So when that ship gets damaged, it should be like if their wife gets injured, or if their kid's sick, things like that. Like that's the type of connection we're really trying to foster. Somebody, I forget who said it, I might have been on one of these podcasts, said there's a reason that most of our Star Trek shows are named after the ship, right? It's not necessarily Star Trek Cisco or Star Trek Janeway, right? It's Discovery, it's Enterprise, it's Deep Space Nine, right?
Prodigy.
Right. So those characters of the ship, it should be meaningful when they get hurt and destroyed or wrecked.
Yeah.
I want to add to that I want to go back on something you said with the ship, and if we were in space. So I want people to understand the distinct difference between Star Trek and Star Wars. Star Wars, life is droids and life is clones, and they make a big statement that this is meaningless life, and they throw at it and let them destroy each other in horrible, horrible ways. It's battle fodder constantly. So Star Trek is about preserving life, and I even noticed this with these other space beings. And why I say that, like Klingons or Cardassians, the reason I say that is because if you were in space, let's picture ourselves in space. And For All Mankind makes the TV show For All Mankind really starts showing how I think this would really evolve if humankind moves into space. When your ship gets damaged, that could kill everybody. But that doesn't only count for if someone's attacking you, the attackers feel the same way. So they're really only going to attack you if they're desperate and have really good reason to believe they have a chance of winning. This is true even if it's a Klingon versus Federation battle, and Klingons love battle. But they are really looking for the advantage in it. So when your players are coming in, maybe they're coming in from Dungeons and Dragons, maybe they're coming in from Star Wars, maybe they're coming in from some of these more rock'em, sock'em, hack'em, slash'em. You may have to have a little conversation like, I hope you understand that you're in a ship, no one around you for dozens of light years. If you take damage, you're probably dead if your life support goes down, and we treat our game, I know, with that much sanctity of life, that if you're firing a photon torpedo at somebody, you better be pretty sure that you can defend if they retort, if they come back at you. And that's what makes Star Trek different, is the preservation of life, not only on my ship, but understanding the impact on other ships. And that really tends to me to slow down the players a little bit, to be like, let's be super cautious and not go pew pew. Let's negotiate if we can so that we all survive,
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I think that's one of the things I love about Nathan's design for the system, is that he intentionally built in, like, if you're going to use photon torpedoes, that's you intentionally ratcheting up the lethality and the danger. You're going to, spend that threat. It's a big deal, or not spend the threat, but you're adding threat to because it's escalating the situation. But no, I think, Michael, you make a great point. Like have that talk with your players and say, look, this isn't like a lot of other RPGs. When you get into a combat, the end goal is not to wear down your opponent into oblivion, right? You're not looking for the 0 HP solution here, because you're not going to gain any experience points. You're not going to get any loot or treasure. You don't have to get into a fight to beat somebody into submission. Like I think about the great fight between Khan and Kirk in Star Trek II, The Wrath of Khan, right? Those two, the Reliant and the Reliant and the Enterprise, beat the hell out of each other, but neither of them get destroyed in the combat. I mean, there's an exception, because the Reliant used the Genesis device, which was the ultimate, Deus Ex Machina kind of thing at the very end there. But the combat piece of it, they were battering away at each other, and they were badly damaged at certain points, and then they got repairs. But that's what you should be shooting for, more so than I'm just going to keep firing and firing and firing and firing. I'm just going to destroy you utterly. Because, if you're Starfleet and doing that, you're probably going to have a conversation in the next episode from senior Starfleet commander or something, saying, this isn't. What was your reason for just obliterating the ship when you already had them, defeated or whatever, right?
Yeah. I mean, and just think about what's happening on the International Space Station right now. I don't care how much an American may disagree with a Russian. They're not getting in a fight up there.
Mm-hmm.
That's not reality. Is you don't fight in space. Your life you're already hanging by a thread in this life support system as it is. So I think in Star Trek, they showed this is a dangerous job, and you don't mess with your starship systems unless you're really pushed to the edge.
Yeah, I don't know. It's you only because you brought it up. I'm gonna go give you a non sequitur for a second here. Have either of you seen the trailer for the ISS movie that's coming up? Like I saw that trailer in the movie theater, and I was like, this doesn't feel right. Like if I'm on a bunch of mixed nationality astronauts on the ISS, and a nuclear war happens on Earth, we're not going to be fighting each other, because like this ISS is like an eggshell in space, and if any of us screw it up, we're all dead, and then who cares, right? So I don't know the plot. I've only saw what was in the trailer, and I'm like, this doesn't feel right. So
no, actually, it's funny that you said that, because I saw that and I thought the same thing. I was like, I'm never fighting in space. It's too precarious.
Yeah, like I watched what was the movie with Sandra Bullock, Gravity, where like the space station just got obliterated by all this debris. It's like, no, come on. Anybody who's in space is going to be working together to try to somehow get out of it. Like everybody's a friend once you're in space, man. Come on.
Dead on right, and that sums up really ship to ship battle in Star Trek to me. Is that even and we've seen it actually in naval times too. In naval wars, there is generally a respect among captains and sailors, because when they're out at sea, that's equal to space, right? And there's just certain things in rules of war you just don't do, because once someone's in the water, they're already dead. Yeah, so interesting. Anything else to add about that kind of?
The only thing that I wanted to throw in is like the kind of aftermath, right? Even though we see this beautiful Galar class getting destroyed behind you, Michael, and when we see explosions like that in Star Trek, we assume that like, oh, that ship has been turned to dust. Likely not, right? Likely there are 3 or 4 major sections that are still there that could potentially still have life on board, right? In this eggshell that you were just talking about, and now. You may have won the battle, but now the Starfleet kicks in, right? Like you need to make sure that everybody who is on there is safe and can get the medical attention they need, and so on and so forth. So when you are having these head-to-head battles, just remember, if you do cause an explosion like that, that doesn't mean that you vaporize them, right? That means that there are probably people there that maybe didn't want to be in a battle that need saving and rescuing.
Yeah, I think if Aaron Paulier was on the show with us, he would remind us that starships are really, really durable, and especially, I mean, certainly Starfleet ships. I'm willing to bet most of the different civilizations have bulkheads and have force fields that can snap into place. Like we see force fields happening all the time on the shows. Like if there's a hull breach, force field snaps on within a couple of seconds. There's usually the obligatory poor person who gets sucked out into space. You get that horrible, sad moment of like, this person just got sucked out into space. Yeah, and then the force field.
They hit a bulkhead on the way out, of course, just to really give it that je ne sais quoi.
Just that little bit, yeah.
As you're saying this, I want people to visualize Discovery. That episode when the force field kicked in first season was mind-blowingly cool.
Oh, right. Where Burnham was in the brig, right, and had to get out. Yeah, so that's a great example. And then the season finale of the second season of Strange New Worlds, right, where the Cayuga gets obliterated, or not obliterated, but gets destroyed essentially by the Gorn, but like half the saucer is still intact. And there's still people, or at least one person, still alive on the ship. I'm willing to bet there were more, but we didn't go into detail. I'm sure Chapel wasn't the only one left alive. Come on, but spoiler warning if you haven't seen it yet. But anyway, so like clearly, even though that saucer got chopped in half, there were still force fields and bulkheads, and there were security protocols built into it that was keeping it alive. And you can see the oxygen was venting from certain places, and it looked cool and dramatic, and even the bridge was still largely intact even though it got damaged. So like yes, even though you've destroyed a ship, there's still a lot of collateral damage, and there's still a lot of people probably on that vessel that are still alive that guess what, you blew up the ship, you're kind of obligated to go rescue them now, because you're the only 2 ships in a very large quantity of space, and you can't necessarily rely on rescue to come get them, because they may not have communications, they may not have the means to help themselves. So you may have just created a bigger problem for yourself. And gosh, what a great plot line that would be, right?
Well, this is where Star Trek is very interesting, because usually what you see in ship-to-ship battle is what you said. One ship beats up the ship enough to do what? Send a boarding party. Now you take your players back into maybe a playing system that they're more used to, the phasers and hand-to-hand combat. So game masters, maybe you use that as the teaching tool. If you do get into ship-to-ship battle, whichever one comes out on top, don't have your players afraid that it ends the game the minute their weapons are disabled and engines are disabled. Maybe what you do is to tone it down and make it more Star Trek realistic, is you now have the Klingons beam on board, and now they're on a fight to save their ship while trying to figure out, can they repair it at the same time and beat the other ship? So there's different ways you could play it, which are way more, to me, I know, realistic. If we lived in space, I think it would be way more realistic and actually a little bit more fun for the players to pull off that James T. Kirk let them beam on board and then blow them up type of thing. Star Trek Voyage Home. I mean, Star Trek Search for Spock, right?
Yeah. But I think now that you mentioned it, Michael, I think this is also a good way, or not good, but this could be an interesting way to like maybe if you've got a group of players on your ship and some of them are kind of restless because like they feel like, well, during ship combat I don't have anything to do, right? Like the tactical officer and the helm officer got all the cool stuff to do. I'm like working sensors or something. That's a great opportunity to throw some people on a shuttle, send the shuttle off to another ship. Maybe there's a ship that's in need of some rescuing, or maybe you're going to send a boarding party to a ship that you've just kind of beaten down, and you're off to the next part of the battle. Send a shuttlecraft over there, or do something like what Shax did at the end of the first season of Lower Decks, right? Grab Rutherford, get in a shuttle, go crash into the enemy, and plant that computer virus, right? So that's an opportunity to give players who may not be getting enough things to do during the ship combat, split the party, go get them off to another part, and then just cut scenes, right? Cut scenes back and forth between the 2 groups or 3 groups, or whatever you feel comfortable with doing.
Yeah, and I mean I can't keep track of the number of times I've seen like Nurse Chapel fighting off intruders on the Enterprise, right? So like this gives the people who wouldn't normally be on the bridge something else that they could bite their teeth into if they needed. So I really like that idea.
Yeah, and gosh, non sequitur, but I love the second season of Discovery or of Strange New Worlds, because it showed us that the two people in the sick bay are 2 of the sickest fighters on the ship, right? Like you got M'Benga and Chapel. They both have military hardcore wartime experience from the Federation Klingon War, and now they're coming in and they're like two of the toughest fighters, 2 of the scrappiest fighters on the ship, which is hilarious to me because I think we've seen them fight probably more than La'an. I think. I know La'an's done a lot of phaser shooty stuff, but I don't think I've seen her do as much hand-to-hand fisticuff stuff like Chapel and M'Benga. That's a funny aside.
No, you're totally right. And I think that actually what I like about that, where it actually matches, is I know one of the things myself and Al have been designing into modules that are going to be coming out are optional encounters. And I know the reason we're doing these optional encounters is just in case you have something that's focused on, say, ship to ship battle, let's build in some options to give game masters, okay, while this is going on, you could also do this for the doctor, or also do this for this, the chief engineer. So if you are game mastering and you're designing a story, design also, okay, while this is happening, what are optional encounters to keep people busy at the same time? And that way everyone feels like they're part of the battle.
Yep, totally.
Okay. All right. So we did the big fleet battle. We just took it to ship battle. Of course, remembering that to me, my big takeaway that is just ask them what they want to do and tell them the role that they need to do it until they get their rhythm. Now, what if we want a super simplified system of ship battle, which to me is more the standard Star Trek narrative when it comes to how battles happen? Do you want to start, Jim, with that one? Your suggestions?
I'm not quite sure exactly where you're going with this, but I lean into it and I hearken to all the great scenes in The Next Generation where it's Picard facing off against Commander Tomalak or some other adversary captain, and it's a game of brinksmanship, right? It's negotiation, it's posturing, it's threatening. It's like they escalate, and they're just about ready to push the button, and something resolves the plot, and they're like, oh, now we can step back from the edge, and oh, we'll get you next time. Oh, you're right on the edge of the neutral zone. No, we're just going to play this game of cat and mouse with each other. So that's one way to do it. Is have the potential of space combat be front and center, and use that as a tensioner to ratchet up the tension for the players. And maybe spend some threat, bring in some reinforcements. Like I did that in a great session where the crew went to a alien space station that had a bunch of like small scale fighters around it, and as things got more tense during the episode, I spend 2 threat here, 2 threat there. Oh, another a flotilla of ships come to the station, and another flotilla. It's like gradually just ratcheting up the tension, And it's like they felt like, oh, there's going to be a space combat coming. We're just got to get ready for it. What do we do? What do we do? And they kept digging, and they kept digging for the solution, for the diplomatic negotiation solution, and eventually it worked, because that's like I was willing to go any direction with it, but they went there, and I was like, okay, let's do it, because that felt right, So play with it that way. But Al, what's your perspective?
Yeah, I think the way I would do something like that, Jim, is I think this is where I would go rules. I would probably go to the captain's log and start using the dice rolls from the captain's log as because the way I think of it is, it doesn't have to be ship-to-ship combat, right? It's a ship-to-ship encounter.
Yeah.
Right. And the way one ship comes out on top over another ship is up to the crew, right? So whether you are sparring with words or whether you are firing phasers and torpedoes, you're still trying to get successes against that ship. And the way captain's log works is if you roll a miss, that ship has gotten a success on you. So I think I might actually just to have some dice rolling in there, I might bring in that captain's log type rolling to see what's happening on the spar. Like, don't go super crunchy with it, but just so that you can adjust the narrative accordingly as you're going through that. I think captain's log works really, really well. I would make a couple of tweaks maybe in that, maybe the number of hits you need to succeed would be more if it's a diplomatic thing than if it was a phaser thing, right? If it's a particularly stubborn species that you're head to head with, like let's say the Clickets from Lower Decks, it might be a lot harder to reach a diplomatic solution with them than a firefight. So I might tweak Captain's Log just a little bit.
You know how I would tweak? I want to say how I would tweak that if you're.
The other thing that I would do is, if it does turn to ship combat, I would use the number of hits needed to succeed or to overcome or defeat would be equal to the scale of the ship. Instead of just saying 3 successes and the story's over. So if you're in phaser against a scale 6 ship, you're going to need some more hits, to overcome it. Those are the tweaks that I would make on it.
Well, just to remind,
why didn't we think of that?
No, it is actually. So first of all, I just wanted to expand that how it reads in Captain's Log. In fact, on page 214 of Captain's Log, create hit tracks based on scale.
Yeah.
Okay.
+2 if you're the hero ship.
Okay.
So yeah, and so I just want to be clear on that. That is the case. So it is scale +2.
Oh, it is. Okay.
Yeah, so that makes sense. The bigger the ship, the more hits it can take. I like your idea about the command argument, about the negotiating, and how I would base those hit track is the command score. I would take the command score of the main captain, or the captain, if they're because usually captains are command 4 or 5, right? Yeah. Command 4 or 5 against the command score of the opponent, and then go hits like that. That's intimidation, negotiation, diplomacy. I like that.
Maybe even the commander's command score plus the scale of their ship, right? Like if the size of their ship is like a factor, Picard on the Galaxy class is a step up from Ducat on the dinky freighter that he got at one point in DS9, right? Like there's a scale thing that he's got the bigger ship that could be more intimidating, that might influence my diplomacy. I might need a couple extra successes to chip away at that. Maybe that's just a thought.
No. I love that. What I would do is take the captain's command score with the ship's command score, because that represents his diplomatic attaches, the reputation of the ship as a diplomatic. So normally I know we do disciplines with attributes or ship systems with departments. In this case, I actually would do captain to make the track. I would do captain's command score with ship command score. Because if a captain is in a shuttlecraft command 0, he's not that impressive. But if all of a sudden he's in command 5 Enterprise, his 5 + 5 is a 10 track. I think that makes they have a lot of posturing behind them.
Yeah.
and I would run that way. So I really like that idea, Al, and I think that's going to be a modification, Jim, we bring into our collab game.
I love it. Yeah, Al, I can't remember. Like I know it's been a couple of years, and I'm on to like the next book. Like, was it Nathan who came up with the idea in the player guide or the game master guide to get away from the idea of always having to match an attribute to a discipline, and started playing with it to say you could do attribute or discipline, or just like really like mix and match the characters with the ships. Is that where we started doing that?
Yeah, I think so. Nathan had been doing that with I think John Carter was the first that actually did that. So he basically brought that in, and a lot of the Game Master Guide are things that Nathan had in other books as well. Yeah, and John Carter, if I remember correctly, it doesn't have skills at all. It's just attributes, and you pair up two attributes.
Okay.
So I think that's where that came from.
Got it. Okay. So I guess, if there's any players who've made it through the hour that we've been going on about this, like maybe just think, players and game masters, like realize that the system is super fluid. It's super, super flexible. And I think coming from a hardwired game like, D&D and Pathfinder, where the rules are very, very clear and very, very like, this is how you do it. Because D&D's been around for 40 some years. It knows what it wants to do, and it does it very well. But to find that wiggle room in the core set itself, I mean, if you're designing a 5th edition game, that's one thing. But like playing core mechanics, it's like, okay, this is how you do it, right? But for Star Trek Adventures, gosh, you can play with these numbers all day long to do what you want them to do.
And honestly, now that you mentioned it, and I'm going to start doing this in our game, Al, what I could see, if everyone's agreeable to simplifying to captain's log ship combat rules in our game, I have to talk and make sure they agree with it. I would actually treat it like 2 extended tasks going on at the same time. So while you're in the middle of ship battle, you could also still be doing a diplomatic track. We see that happen in Star Trek all the time. So it's whoever finishes the track first. Right. And so I think having those simultaneously, where you got part of the people doing that operations tactical stuff, you still have your captain and maybe your counselor and doctor trying to find a diplomatic solution. That would be a real fun way to run a double extended task.
Yeah. Or even you could even go further with it. Like I was thinking about the Discovery season 2 finale, where they're fighting Control, but in the meantime, they're desperately trying to build that time suit so they can get Burnham on her way, right? So like you got the combat thing going on and then extended task, and then you got Burnham and company building that suit extended task, and then there was probably another one in there about it was all the subplots and things going on, but you could easily add in another element where maybe well, I mean, actually, I guess Giorgio and Nan fighting Leland, that whole little sub thing could have been an extended task too, because like they had a goal. They were trying to lead him to the spore drive thingy, and so that they could lock him in and screw him up. So that could have almost been 3 separate extended tasks happening, all stacked up against each other, right? I mean, I'm sure there's other examples, but that's just the one that came to mind.
Yeah, and that goes with those optional encounters we talked about. And then again, one of the reasons, again, I'll pitch it to you, Al, first, because you're on the group. If we did this method for ship-to-ship combat, I would love to use the captain's log roll-on breaches too. So because it's more narrative. It's not as technical as STA, but it tells you, okay, in this case, you have a major complication happening or a major breach. Here, it's a minor thing. Based off that, I can then create linear tasks or tasks to keep other players busy based off how that rolls very, high level in Captain's Log. I think we're a very narrative-based group who are super creative and don't mind throwing themselves into complications. So I think for our type of narrative group, that might work.
Yeah, and at the same time, there are groups that prefer to get into the nitty-gritty, right? So if you are doing that and you want to keep track of, this is my second breach to engines and this is what's going on, do it. Like if your players are for it, like go nuts. And I think that You just need a way to track those things, whether it's a dry erase board, whether it's a piece of paper that you're all looking at, or something on a virtual tabletop. Have your 6 systems and say, how many breaches have happened to each, if that's something that you're into. I know that we have a lot of players coming from like VASA and Starfleet battles and things like that are really interested in those type of minutia, because it is pretty realistic, the way the system is written in the books. But if you're finding that that's a little bit overwhelming, absolutely, just go to the captain's log breaches. I think that would help a lot.
Yeah. Yeah, but yeah, you're right, Al. If you're the type of player or the type of group that enjoys tracking power expenditures and you want to do that, sure, go ahead. The system's there. Absolutely, do it all day long. Track your breaches, track your power expenditures. What else is there? The shield and hull, all that great stuff. So go crazy.
I find, and this is just my experience talking, I find it way easier, instead of tracking that me as a game master use the complications that the players roll or the threat in order to create complications that power's not doing well. Therefore, their next task rolls are more difficult. And I think that's just to me, that's a more truncated way to do it, as opposed to tracking all that. Use the trait system to do it. Advantages, complications. You're still getting to the same point.
Yeah.
In my opinion.
Yeah, and complications pop up all the time on the show. I mean, it's not hard to find. Like, if you get into the right mindset, it's like, oh, that's a complication. Oh, there's a complication. I was just watching New Eden last night, Discovery, where wait, was it New Eden? No, it was the Brothers. The one where it was the first episode of the second season, where Pike and Burnham and Connolly and Nan are all flying the little pods to get to the Hiawatha, right? And there's just this one moment where Pike is having a bad day. His bubble starts to crack, and he's like, "Well, I'm gonna eject." It's like, "Oh, my helmet doesn't work." Well, I was like, "Oh shit, there's a complication right there." He was having a bad dice day, I guess. The player playing Pike got a couple of complications right there, and the game master took advantage of it. All these little things that pop up.
This is good. This is really good. All right. So let's kind of, sum up from high level again to the mid to the bottom. Maybe we'll each take one. Let's have Al. Actually, no, I think Al. I'll have you start. Sum up again fleet battles if people want to hear that, and then Jim, you'll do the mid level, and I'll handle the super simplified.
Okay. So a couple of different options when doing fleet battles, right? You can do something that's more like a board game where in the background, parts of your fleet are interacting with the enemy fleet and just using single rolls to see what's happening in that area, while the focus is still narratively on the players on the hero ship. So that's one option you could do. The other option is to use the crew qualities from the core rulebook and give everybody a ship that they fly around during the battle. That does tend to take a little bit longer, but it gives everybody a chance to kind of interact and fire phasers and things like that. The recommendation on that would be, of course, to just use the modified Game Master breach tracker, just so that you don't have a lot of minutia. And those are probably two ways that you could do mass combat in a way that is fairly succinct.
Yes. And if you do the second method, you have to play the theme song to Top Gun the entire time.
Nice.
All right, Jim, mid-level ship-to-ship combat.
Mid-level ship-to-ship combat, you can pretty much run it as is right out of the book. Just remember and encourage your players that it's not about just beating the other ship into oblivion. It's you get to a point, and then there's probably going to be a story beat where there's some consequence or some reason to think about. Okay, we've knocked out their engines, we've knocked out their weapon systems. They are not really now able to do anything. Now it's time to reopen negotiations now that you've got the upper hand. And now what do? Or maybe you send a landing party, or you send a boarding party, or you send a rescue team. Maybe something's happened and you're not sure what's happening. Or maybe in the midst of that fight, some MacGuffin comes up and you're like, oh, wait, we shouldn't be fighting them. We should be doing something else. But as far as mechanics and stuff go, I think the the rules, make sure everybody has something to do. And if it's clear that some people are like ready to do something else, then give them that opportunity. Find a story reason to get them off the ship or into another part of the ship. Maybe the other ship sends a boarding party to your ship, right? And now instead of fiddling with the sensors on the bridge, now they've got to go defend their ship and defend their crewmates, and see what that does. So play with that angle before you go down to the next level and using Captain's Log. And Michael will tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, so Captain's Log, I'll say Captain's Log page 214. We wanted to make it so simple. We drew a flow chart for you, well designed by Josh Allen, of course, who was one of the major writers on that one. So in that case, you're not playing every minutia of your ship breaking apart. You're more narrative. You're like, okay, it took a hit. You roll on a random table. What was that hit and the impact of it? And you really let your players narrate what that looks like. If you want to make it so that repairs are necessary, create complications. The complications are them taking action against the repairs. You could make it a linear gated challenge or an extended task if you want to. But in that way, I feel that, in my opinion, that's one of the most common things we see in Star Trek is, a phaser hits the ship and Worf says, "We just lost the right starboard engine." Okay, that's a complication. Maneuverability on con tasks are now 1+1 difficulty until repaired. So I think that, to me, is where I like seeing our Star Trek game fall. I just have to get all the guys to agree with it at our next game session.
Yeah, for sure. For sure. Or I love the great the moments of like, we have a hull breach on deck 17, and maybe earlier in the episode somebody important was on deck 17. Now you've got a potential subplot or thing to go deal with. Like the person on the bridge is like, oh wait a minute, X person was on deck 17. Oh my gosh, now what happens?
Spin your threat tension for a reversal. They got sucked down into space, right?
Yep. Yep.
Yep. True. All right, fantastic. I love telling people that, again, this is a continuing conversation. This started in the morning with me, Al, and Jim on Facebook saying, hey, what are something we're hearing a lot on social media we need to talk about? And Al proposed this. And so, Al, look how much we got content out of this. So thank you so much for the proposal.
Good stuff.
All right, let's close with gratitude then. I'll do myself, then Al, then Jim. My gratitude today is actually going to go to Al. and it's because the idea, what I know, and it goes to a lot of the people on social media today. I don't know. I'm sure Jim saw it. I'm sure Al saw it. I was working, and then someone put a question on Discord in the STA rules query. And there was a couple fans that just answered it so cohesively and put in links and solutions. And Jim, you always talk about this with the fans. I got to say, this is so great that we have these discussions. And even the reason, Al, I wanted to focus on saying thank you to you is because just now people just saw what we're like when we modify the game rules to fit our needs. And it's always been like this, playing with you and with everybody. So thank you for being one of my creative inspirations. All right, Al, next to you, go over to you.
Well, I appreciate that, Michael. You're too nice as always. I'm gonna say thank you to any designer that has gone into designing miniatures-based Starfleet combat simulators, right? We had Starfleet Battles still exists today, and that was written over 30 years ago. And there are still community members making new ships and putting them out there for everyone to use. The FASA Starfleet Battle Simulator, even right now, WizKids is, they produced Attack Wing. They've got a new one called Into the Unknown coming out, where it's like capital ships in combat with each other. And there's a lot of people out there that are trying to focus on this very small niche of Star Trek. And we do appreciate all the work that you do to keep people excited about the franchise.
Nice. Thank you, Al. I have two thank yous. I think I'll do the fans first, because I'm always appreciative of the fans, but I always feel like I tack it on at the end. And it's exactly because of what Michael said. Like there's so many different well-known social media channels now where the game is heavily talked about. You got the subreddit and Discord and Facebook and the official forums and stuff. And I really appreciate the fan base, because like we've always got new people coming into the game, like literally every week. Someone's buying the core book, someone's buying the PDF, someone's checking out the quick start, whatever. There's always, like, especially the Facebook group, I see constantly, the admins post the welcome new members every Sunday. And it's like there's always this long list of new people. And I'm like, I'm so excited to see these new people, right? But invariably what happens is they'll ask I don't mean this disparagingly, they'll ask the newbie questions, right? They're new to the game, they've got questions, they have issues with the core book. Yeah, okay, we know, 7 years, I get it. we've heard it all before. Not to say your concerns are not valid, but we've heard it. But they ask all these great questions, and sometimes I'll read the question, I'm like, okay, here we go again. And I'll get ready to start typing, right? And it's like, oh, wait a minute. Someone's already posted a nice, long, beautiful description, linking out to continuing conversations, linking out to continuing mission, linking out to any of the resources or stuff that are out there. It's like, oh, my job is done. I don't have to do anything. I can just hit the like button and call it good. So grateful for all the fans, for everything that you're doing for the game. For supporting the game, supporting each other. Super thankful for you. Can't thank you enough. And I think the best, I don't remember who it was who reminded me of this. It might have been Eric Campbell who reminded me that the way we say thank you to the fans is putting our heart and soul and love into each product that comes out for the next one. So you just keep adding it. Not to say we're being mercenary and we're expecting you to buy it, right? Because of course it's a business. So we got to do it, right? Put my Ferengi years on. But that's our thank you to you, is like we just love what you're doing. So that's the big thank you right there. I also want to say thank you to both of you and to all the contributors of Star Trek Adventures, because no lie, guys, in the last 3 days, I have touched, just in the course of my project management and line editing, working on all these different products that I'm working on, I think I touched 21 different products, whether it's a mission brief or a standalone or a book or a thing that I'm working on, and wow, or line editing or proofing, or I mean, just there's stuff, right? There's just so much stuff. But every single time I read one of these things, I get little sparks of ideas, like every sentence, every chapter, every paragraph you guys write. And it's not just you two. It's everybody. It's everybody who we've brought on board. And it's like, oh, that's a great idea. That's a great idea. And it's like a little dagger in my back. It's like, oh, you just don't have the time to play. You don't have the time to run the game. You don't have the time. It's like, but look at all this stuff I want to play with.
Let's try to find the same rest home when we all retire.
I know.
Wouldn't that be cool? Let's find a nice rest home, a good table. Play Star Trek today. I'm gonna use part of my retirement savings for the ultimate gaming table, with the little slide outs and all that. And
I'm there. Yeah. Give me my protein shake and my Jello, and roll me up to the table with my D20s, and I'm good to go. Let's do it.
My IV, so I don't have to drink.
That's right. Put the Star Trek music on. I'm good. I'm there. I would be there all day long. So anyway, thank you to all I know it might sound a little self-serving, but I am grateful that all of you are on board with all your great ideas, and that you're tapping into that Star Trek creative unconscious and putting it into the products, because I read that stuff so much and I'm like, oh, these are such great ideas, and I just can't wait to get them out into the world. So thank you all.
And for those of you who are watching or listening to this, basically the three of us here, including others, we're I'll call us the Section 31 of Star Trek Adventures, because we know so many goodies are coming out and we can't even tell you. I mean, there's such stuff coming. There's stuff.
Stop. When we make them mad.
When we don't talk about stuff, when all of a sudden we fall silent, that's all I'm gonna say.
Yeah. Or in my case, I'm just so freaking busy.
Yeah. but I got to be a comedian about this for a second before we close out. It's funny because we'll be active talking, and then people will start talking about something special, and then we're all like, you hear nothing from us.
Crickets.
Section 31. All right, everyone. IDIC.
Live long and prosper. Be safe. Be well. We'll talk to you all again real soon.